Imagine being 70 years old.
Right.
You lose your husband. 53 years you've been married to this man.
That's a whole lifetime.
It is. And then exactly 14 days later, you are walking out of your own home.
With basically nothing.
Literally nothing. A winter coat, an old pocket watch, and exactly $47 to your name.
Wow.
And the reason you're walking away with nothing isn't because of a bank foreclosure or a fire. It's because your own children have just legally evicted you from your life.
Yeah, it's a brutal setup.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are looking at this absolute masterclass in, survival, deception, and, well, the quiet, lethal competence of people that society just assumes are powerless.
Yeah, and the source material we're using to unpack this today is it's actually pretty unusual for us.
It is, yeah. Tell them what we're looking at.
Right, so we are analyzing a transcript. It's titled The Inheritance. And it was originally produced for this advanced English listening practice program.
Called My English Podcast, right?
Exactly, My English Podcast. And this specific story was designed to test C2 level English comprehension.
Which is like the absolute highest level of fluency.
It is. But what's so fascinating is that beneath this surface level vocabulary test, there is this profoundly layered narrative.
Oh, totally.
It goes into the legal weaponization of care, the physical mechanics of, hiding wealth, and this really dark psychology of ageism.
Right. And we are going to tear this story down to its studs today. We're going to look at the actual mechanisms of how a family can legally strip an elder of their autonomy. And then we'll get into the physical realities of, well, breaking through a poured concrete floor.
Which is a whole ordeal in itself.
Oh, yeah. And then this astonishing history of bootleg preservation that basically turns a ruined farm into a $30 million battleground.
It's wild.
But to really grasp the magnitude of the discovery at the end of this deep dive, we have to start at the beginning. We have to look at the absolute devastation first.
Right. It starts with the immediate aftermath of a death.
Frank Hale, Margaret's husband.
Yeah, Frank dies on a Tuesday in October.
Yeah.
And the author establishes the psychological baseline of Margaret's life here through the disruption of routine.
It's so sudden.
Exactly. He dies of heart failure in his recliner. And the text specifically notes that when Margaret finds him, the television is still running.
Oh, man.
And the coffee in his mug is still warm.
That detail, the warm coffee, it just...
Right. That specific thermal reality of warm coffee,
Yeah.
the author uses that to test the listener's comprehension of sudden catastrophic change.
It really illustrates how the architecture of a 53-year marriage doesn't just erode slowly.
Right.
In this case, it just collapses between one sip of coffee and the next.
Okay.
And if you just run the math on 53 years of marriage, we are talking about over 19,000 days of a shared existence.
19,000. Wow.
19,000 breakfasts, thousands of shared financial decisions, just decades of building a life. And then, bam, we jump straight to the funeral.
And the funeral is where the story introduces the antagonists, right?
Yeah.
Margaret's children.
Right. David, who is 47, and Karen, who is 44.
And the dynamic established here is incredibly sharp.
It's almost sickening.
It is, because David, he runs the insurance agency that his father built. And at the funeral, he's out in the crowd of 300 people just shaking hands.
Like a politician.
Exactly. He's playing the role of the capable, grieving patriarch. The sociology of this funeral scene is just vital.
Because funerals are basically theater for family dynamics, right?
Absolutely. David is using this event to immediately assert a transfer of authority. He is signaling to the whole community that, hey, I am the new center of gravity for the Hale family.
And Karen's behavior is just as performative.
Oh, completely.
Huh.
The C2 text explicitly notes, and this is a great detail,
Oh.
It notes she is dabbing her eyes with a tissue she didn't actually need.
A dry tissue? I mean, come on.
Right. The author is testing your ability to pick up on performative grief, the mechanics of mimicking sorrow just for social positioning, rather than, experiencing actual emotional devastation.
While they're putting on this show, Margaret is just standing by the casket for hours.
Yeah.
The text says her feet ache, her chest feels completely hollow, but she just stands there thanking every single person because that's what you did.
It's this profound display of endurance.
But the real tragedy is how her kids interpret that behavior.
Yeah, they look at her stoicism. And stoicism is a word that often pops up in C2 vocabulary, meaning the endurance of pain without displaying feelings. They look at that and they misread it completely.
They think she's weak.
Exactly. In our culture, especially regarding ageism, there's this really dangerous tendency to equate silence with ignorance.
Right. Like if you're not making noise, you must be out of it.
Yeah, stillness is seen as a lack of capacity. Because Margaret isn't being loused because she isn't aggressively directing the logistics like David is, they just assume her cognitive and emotional agency is gone.
So they perceive her quiet endurance as an invitation to just take control.
Which they do.
With terrifying speed. I mean, just 2 weeks after the funeral, 14 days, David calls a so-called family meeting at his house.
Yeah, family meeting.
Margaret drives over. She sits at his dining room table. And the imagery the author uses here is so clinical.
It really is.
Karen has a thick folder. David is sitting there with a yellow legal pad. They aren't sitting around with family photo albums crying over their dad.
No, they're armed with the tools of a corporate audit.
That's exactly what it is. And they proceed to just systematically dismantle Margaret's life.
And the mechanics of this dismantling, it relies entirely on the linguistic choices of the children. This is where the C2 test really shines.
Oh, the language is so gross.
It is. Because they don't say, "We are taking your house." David explains that the house was put in his name 12 years ago for, quote, estate planning purposes.
Right.
He tells his mother, and this is a direct quote from the transcript, he says, "I'm not kicking you out, Mom, but Heather and I could use the space."
I physically recoiled reading that line. I mean, telling your newly widowed mother you could use the space.
It's brutal.
And then Karen jumps in to soften the blow. Or, to attempt to sanitize it.
Right. She says they want Margaret to transition to a nice assisted living facility.
Transition.
That word transition is doing an immense amount of heavy lifting there.
Oh, absolutely.
This is where the text really probes your understanding of euphemism. Because transition implies a natural, necessary, and seamless progression.
Like it's just the next logical step.
Exactly. It is a sterile, bureaucratic word, and is being used to mask the violent reality of an eviction.
Right.
By framing it as a transition, Karen completely removes the moral weight of what she's doing. She's adopting the language of a healthcare administrator, not a daughter.
And they don't stop at the house. They move right to the bank accounts.
Yeah.
And these accounts, they represent 42 years of savings. The text highlights that Margaret and Frank literally skipped vacations for decades to build that safety net.
Decades of sacrifice.
And David just calmly reveals that all of that money has already been moved into a trust.
And guess who the co-trustees are?
Oh, let me guess. David and Karen.
David and Karen, they've totally seized the liquidity.
And then Karen says she's taking Margaret's car because Margaret doesn't drive much anymore. So within a 20-minute meeting, they've taken the shelter, the capital, and the mobility.
You can really view this entire dining room table scene through the lens of a hostile corporate takeover.
Yes, that's the perfect analogy.
In the business world, when a large conglomerate absorbs a smaller company, the executives use very specific jargon.
Like synergy, restructuring, asset management.
Exactly. They do that to keep the transaction purely mathematical, devoid of any emotional friction. And David and Karen are applying that exact same strategy to their own mother.
It's sickening.
They use terms like co-trustees and estate management to build this impenetrable linguistic wall. Because think about it, how does a grieving widow argue against estate management?
You can't.
Right. The language itself is designed to neutralize her objections before she can even voice them.
It is the absolute erasure of her adulthood. They are treating a 70-year-old, fully autonomous woman like she's some unpredictable liability.
Yeah.
But Margaret's response to this is what pivots the entire narrative.
It is.
Because she doesn't scream, she doesn't start crying or begging, she just looks at them and asks if there is anything left at all.
And Karen, with almost a laugh, she mentions Grandpa Henry's old farm.
Right, Grandpa Henry. And they both just dismiss it entirely. They say it's assessed at less than the back taxes owed on it, the house is rotting, the roof is caving in.
Mathematically worthless.
Exactly. They declare it completely worthless. And Margaret just looks at them across this dining room table and simply says, "Then you won't mind if I keep it."
That single sentence, the strategic brilliance of that is just remarkable.
It's so smart.
Margaret recognizes instantly that fighting them on their terms, arguing over trusts and deeds in the language of corporate law, that's a battle she will lose.
They've already done the paperwork. They have the home court advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If she fights for the cash or the house, she triggers their greed, and they will simply out-litigate her.
Yeah.
But by agreeing with their assessment that the farm is worthless, she secures the only remaining piece of independent territory without activating their defensive instincts.
It's a tactical retreat. She is conceding the battle so she can win the war.
Precisely.
So she leaves David's house with her purse, her winter coat, and a single personal artifact. Her father, Henry's engraved pocket watch.
Which she's carried for 22 years.
Right. She goes back to her former home, packs exactly one suitcase, and on the 22nd day after her husband's death, she just leaves.
She takes a Greyhound bus to Dawson, Kentucky.
And this is where the physical reality of her situation really sets in, because the bus drops her off and she has to walk 4 miles to get to the farm.
Yeah, and think about the physical toll of a 4-mile walk carrying a suitcase for a 70-year-old woman under profound emotional distress.
It's grueling.
It is a very stark demonstration of her precarious reality, and the text provides us a really crucial financial data point here. She has exactly $47 to her name.
$47, that's it?
The author places her at the absolute edge of survival, and the farm itself just reflects this desolation.
Yeah, when she gets there, the driveway is just choked with weeds. The white paint has peeled down to bare gray wood. The porch is physically sagging.
And there's no running water or electricity.
It is a total ruin. But the text notes something fascinating here. It says that when she finally sits down on the edge of her father's dusty old chair in this freezing dark house,
Yeah.
it feels more like home than David's temperature-controlled guest bedroom ever could.
Oh, that's such a great line. And it's because the ruined farmhouse represents sovereignty.
Right.
In David's house, she is a managed asset. In the freezing farmhouse, she is the sole proprietor of her existence.
But sovereignty doesn't turn on the faucets. And with only $47, she can't pay the county deposits to get the utilities reconnected. So she spends 3 days just sweeping and cleaning. She's essentially surviving on whatever snacks she brought in her purse.
Yeah, just absolute bare minimum survival.
But then a neighbor driving a beat-up truck spots her and stops. They chat, and they tell her the process for the water company, noting it costs a couple of $100s to get it turned on.
And Margaret doesn't beg.
No, she doesn't beg, she doesn't explain her poverty. But the very next morning, she walks down to the rusted mailbox at the end of the road.
And what does she find?
She finds an unmarked envelope. Inside are $300 and $20 bills, and a note written in shaky handwriting that says, "Henry was a good neighbor, welcome home."
I love this incident. It introduces this fundamental contrast in the socioeconomic structures of the story.
How so?
Well, you have the legal ledger and you have the moral ledger.
Oh, that's good.
David and Karen operated strictly on the legal ledger.
Right.
They used the letter of the law, deeds, trusts, legal pads, to avoid their moral obligation to their mother.
Yeah, to justify robbing her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the community in Dawson, however, operates entirely outside the legal system.
Right.
There are no contracts, there are no IOUs, there are no tax implications for this $300.
Right.
It is purely a transaction on the moral ledger.
The currency is social capital.
Yes.
Henry was a good neighbor. Her father has been dead for 22 years, and yet the goodwill he banked with his neighbors has survived over 2 decades.
And it pays out dividends exactly when his daughter is facing a life or death financial crisis.
It's incredible.
And the method of delivery is critical too. They didn't hand the money to her face to face. They put it in the mailbox.
Why do you think that is?
The underlying mechanism here is the preservation of her dignity. If they hand it to her directly, they force her into a posture of immediate gratitude, maybe even submission.
Oh, that makes sense. Like she's a charity case.
Exactly. By leaving it anonymously, they provide mutual aid without establishing a hierarchy. True community operates on this principle of lateral support, whereas her children operated on top-down vertical control.
So with the $300, she gets the water turned on, the house becomes a functional shelter, but her attention is constantly drawn to this structure out back.
A barn.
The barn. It has a partially collapsed roof, but its heavy wooden doors are sealed shut by this massive rusted padlock.
Yeah.
And the text provides this flashback from when Margaret was a little girl. Her father strictly forbade her from ever going near that barn. He told her it was his workshop and there was nothing in there for little girls.
The psychological barrier matches the physical barrier perfectly. Her father, Henry, maintained these strict boundaries.
Right.
But Margaret is no longer a child bound by her father's rules. I mean, she has just been stripped of everything by her own children. The old rules of polite compliance, they just don't apply to her anymore.
She is done being polite. So she spends her first week getting the house in order, and then on the 8th day, she walks out to the barn carrying a simple claw hammer.
Just a standard hammer.
Yeah. She wedges the claws behind the hasp of the rusted padlock, leverages her body weight, and just rips the screws straight out of the rotting wood.
Wow.
The lock hits the dirt. She pulls open the heavy doors. Inside, it's exactly what you'd expect at first glance.
Right.
Yeah, ancient decomposing hay, rusted farm implements, fallen beams. But as she walks around, she notices something weird about the floor.
Beneath the hay.
Right, beneath the scattered hay, it isn't burnt. It is wall-to-wall, smoothly poured concrete.
Now, the physical presence of a poured concrete floor in an old agricultural barn is highly anomalous.
Very out of place.
Yeah, because concrete requires significant capital, logistics, and labor to pour.
Yeah.
It's not something you just throw down for a standard workshop. And Margaret notices the acoustics.
Yes, the text mentions she stomps her boot near the back corner.
And the sound doesn't thud with the dull resonance of solid earth. It rings hollow.
The acoustic feedback tells her there is a void space underneath, but obviously she knows a claw hammer isn't going to get through reinforced concrete.
Not a chance.
So she walks the 4 miles back into town. She goes to Patterson's Hardware to buy a 10-pound sledgehammer and a steel pry bar.
Which is a heavy load.
Oh, yeah. And this is where she encounters Tom Briggs. Tom is a local guy, probably in his 60s, and he sees the 7-year-old woman trying to buy a massive sledgehammer.
Right.
He asks her what she's doing. She tells him straight up. She says, "I'm Henry Hale's daughter, and I need to break through a concrete floor in his old barn."
And Tom's reaction is just the complete antithesis of David and Karen's.
Completely.
Because he doesn't tell her she needs to transition to a rocking chair. He doesn't question her mental state.
No.
He listens to her objective, he evaluates the physics of the situation, and he says, swinging a sledgehammer at concrete at your age is a good way to end up in the hospital.
Which is just a fact.
Right, it's a fact. But then he offers a mechanical solution, a pneumatic jackhammer powered by an air compressor.
I really want to focus on that transition for a second.
Yeah.
From the sledgehammer to the pneumatic jackhammer.
Yeah, let's look at that.
Because it perfectly illustrates the difference between infantilizing someone and empowering them.
Absolutely.
Tom recognizes the physical limitations of human joints and bones striking concrete. But instead of saying, "You can't do this, let me do it for you," he offers a tool that multiplies her physical force.
He provides the horsepower she needs.
Exactly. He provides the horsepower required to execute her vision safely.
And that's exactly the point. The mechanism of their interaction is built entirely on mutual respect.
Yeah.
And when she asks him, why are you offering thousands of dollars worth of heavy equipment to a stranger? His response echoes the note in the mailbox.
Because Henry was a good man.
Yes, because Henry was a good man. It just reinforces this theme that Henry's past behavior is actively financing Margaret's present survival.
So Tom arrives at her property at 6:45 the next morning.
Early.
Very early. They unload the compressor, they hook up the thick yellow air hoses, and the sensory details the author uses here are just so intense.
The C2 vocabulary really works well here.
Yeah, the sheer deafening noise of the pneumatic jackhammer biting into the concrete, it just shatters the quiet of this abandoned farm.
Right.
They work at it, taking turns, and after about 40 minutes of breaking up the slab, the steel chisel of the jackhammer strikes something that doesn't crumble.
It produces a sharp metallic clang.
They clear away the debris and dust, and they uncover this dull, gray, heavy steel hatch set directly into the foundation.
And Tom identifies it right away as military-grade hardware.
Yeah. And securing this steel hatch is a heavy-duty commercial combination lock.
And this right here, this is the moment where the most mundane object in the entire story becomes its absolute most critical pivot point.
Yes. The text describes Margaret reaching into her coat pocket and pulling out the engraved pocket watch her father left her.
The watch she's carried every single day for 22 years.
Let's analyze the narrative function of this pocket watch because it's brilliant.
It really is. For 2 decades, it served as just a talisman of grief, right? Just a mere sentimental artifact.
Yeah, her children certainly saw it when they were liquidating her life at the dining room table.
And they completely dismissed it because it had no obvious monetary value.
Right.
But the author reveals here that the watch is actually a data storage device.
It's a Trojan horse. It looks like sentimental junk, but engraved on the back casing are 4 distinct numbers.
Yeah.
Her father gave it to her on his deathbed and told her, "Keep this. You'll know when you need it."
And standing in the dust of the barn, staring at a combination lock, she finally knows.
She kneels down. The text says her hands are physically shaking. She dials the 4 numbers from the watch into the lock. The shackle clicks and pops open, and she just whispers, "That's what the watch was for."
The emotional release in that scene is profound.
It really is.
She and Tom grab the handle, and they heave the heavy steel hatch open, and beneath it is a steel ladder descending into total darkness.
And Tom, attempting to be chivalrous, he offers to climb down first to ensure it's safe.
But Margaret stopped him.
She does. She says, "No, this is my father's. I'll go first."
She absolutely refuses to surrender her agency, even at the threshold of the unknown.
Right. She clicks on a heavy flashlight and climbs down the cold steel rungs. And what she finds at the bottom is just breathtaking.
The reveal is amazing.
The flashlight beam sweeps across this subterranean vault that stretches the entire width of the barn. It is completely climate controlled by the earth around it. And filling this space are row after row of custom-built, heavy wooden shelving units.
And the shelves are not holding gold bars or cash.
No.
The physical inventory of the vault consists of thousands of glass bottles, and the author is meticulous with the details here.
Very specific.
Yeah, the bottles are sealed with heavy wax over the corks, and each one bears a handwritten label.
Margaret pulls one bottle from the rack and reads her father's handwriting. It says, "Hale Reserve, 1958, barrel 7, bottle 43.
It's whiskey.
A massive, perfectly preserved, secret inventory of vintage aged bourbon.
Thousands of bottles.
Thousands. But before she even processes the scale of the alcohol, her flashlight catches something resting on a clean wooden workbench in the center of the vault.
Yeah.
It's an envelope with her name on it.
And this letter serves as the Rosetta Stone for Margaret's entire childhood.
Totally rewrites her history.
It really does. Because up until this moment, Margaret believed her father was simply a cold, distant, strict agricultural worker who locked doors just to keep his family out.
Just a hard man.
Exactly. But Henry's letter systematically deconstructs that narrative. He confesses that from 1949 until 1962, he operated as a master distiller and an illicit bootlegger.
A bootlegger.
Yeah. He utilized skills passed down from his own father to produce extraordinarily high-quality whiskey outside the purview of federal taxation.
He writes that he built the concrete vault by hand under the cover of darkness to store his product and age it perfectly.
Right.
But in 1962, which is the year Margaret turned 6, the operation collapsed. A man he trusted, a partner in the distribution side, betrayed him.
And this man showed up at the farm with 2 armed men, intending to hijack the vault and the inventory.
Henry's letter states, vaguely but very ominously, that he did what he had to do to protect his family that night.
The implication of violence there is very clear.
Very clear. Following that event, the trauma and the fear of retaliation, or, federal prison, prompted him to entirely seal the vault.
He poured the concrete floor over the hatch himself.
Locked the barn and never spoke of it again.
Think about the psychological earthquake this triggers for Margaret.
It changes everything.
Her father's emotional distance wasn't a lack of love, it was a quarantine.
Wow, a quarantine.
He was isolating her from the dangerous, violent reality of the criminal enterprise that was literally buried under their feet.
He kept her out of the barn, not because he didn't want her around, but because the barn was the epicenter of his absolute greatest fear.
Exactly. The inheritance, therefore, is twofold here.
Right.
Yes, there is the physical asset of the whiskey, but the true primary inheritance is the recontextualization of her father's love.
The letter acts as a profound, posthumous apology.
It restores her family history, and crucially, the letter contains a philosophical directive that will guide her next actions.
Henry writes, and this is such a powerful quote, "The people who love your money are never the people who love you. Trust the ones who show up when you have nothing."
That line is a scalpel.
It is.
It instantly separates Tom Briggs and the neighbor who left the $300 from David and Karen.
Because her children showed up to take the money when she had it and abandoned her when they thought she had nothing.
Exactly. Whereas Tom showed up with a pneumatic jackhammer when all she had was a sledgehammer and $47.
Henry, operating from beyond the grave, accurately diagnosed the exact human dynamics his daughter would face.
It's incredible foresight. He also ends the letter with a command, "Don't let anyone take it from you."
Which is huge.
It transitions Margaret from a mode of discovery into a mode of defense. She now possesses an asset of unknown but likely substantial value.
So, to quantify it, she hires a specialized spirits appraiser out of Louisville.
And the appraiser drives out to the ruined farm, probably expecting, a few dusty jugs of moonshine.
Right, like some backwoods hooch.
But he climbs down the ladder into the vault, and the text says he is literally speechless.
I can imagine.
He examines the wax seals, the ambient temperature of the subterranean room, the lack of UV light. He calls Henry a genius.
He says the storage conditions rival the archives of a museum.
Which is saying something.
Yeah, because the whiskey was bottled in 1958 and perfectly sealed, preventing any oxidation or evaporation, what distillers call the angel's share. The liquid is immaculate.
The economics of vintage spirits are fascinating here. The appraiser calculates the rarity, the pristine condition, and the sheer volume of the thousands of bottles.
And he gives her a number.
He provides Margaret with an estimated valuation of the entire collection, between $20 and $30 million.
$30 million. From $47 in her pocket to $30 million beneath her feet.
It is a staggering leap.
I have a question for you, though, thinking about the listener. Does the introduction of $30 million ruin the underdog aspect of the story for you? Like, does it make it too easy?
That's a great question. But no, I'd argue that the money is secondary to the narrative.
How so?
Because the true inheritance is the agency it provides her and the validation of her father's love.
Right.
The $300 from the neighbor meant as much to her immediate survival as the $30 million. The money is just a tool she'll use to secure her autonomy.
And what I find most compelling about this C2 narrative is that the money doesn't magically solve her character flaws or change her personality.
No, if anything, it just amplifies her pragmatism.
She doesn't buy a mansion or a sports car. She tells the appraiser to quietly broker the sale of a very small initial batch, just 100 bottles.
And those 100 bottles yield between $400,000 and $500,000.
Which is plenty to start.
Exactly. The underlying mechanism of the narrative here is proving that wealth is merely a tool for agency. Margaret uses this initial capital infusion strictly for infrastructure and autonomy.
She pays off the accumulated back taxes, which secures her legal claim to the land.
Vital step.
She hires contractors to replace the rotting roof and fix the plumbing. She buys a reliable, used truck. She essentially resurrects the farm's operational capacity.
She brings the farm back to life.
Yeah.
But, as we know, visible improvements require visible capital.
Yeah. The new roof, the fresh white paint on the siding, the repaired fences, these act as beacons.
But unfortunately, they attract the exact people Henry warned her about.
Her kids.
Karen, her daughter, decides to drive down from Ohio for an unannounced visit.
And Karen's arrival marks the shift into the next phase of the conflict, the legal battle.
Yeah.
Karen parks in the newly gravel-paved driveway. She looks at the new roof, and her immediate reaction is not joy that her mother is safe and thriving.
Definitely not.
Her reaction is intense, suspicious interrogation. She demands to know how Margaret is paying for all of this.
And Margaret, maintaining her stoicism, simply replies, "I managed."
Just, I managed. I love that. The Karen leaves, clearly agitated. And less than a week later, a process server shows up at the farm and hands Margaret a stack of legal documents.
This is where it gets really dark.
Yeah, David and Karen have escalated their corporate takeover strategy to its most extreme legal conclusion. They have petitioned the county court to declare Margaret mentally incompetent.
And they want to place her under a conservatorship, with David appointed as her sole conservator.
We really need to pause here and deeply analyze the legal and psychological framework of a conservatorship, or, adult guardianship.
Yes, it is one of the most severe legal processes in civil law. When a court places you under a conservatorship, it is effectively executing a legal time machine.
How do you mean?
The state legally strips you of your adult personhood and reverts your status to that of an infant.
It's a legal straitjacket. That's how I envision it. A straitjacket made of paperwork.
It is far worse than a straitjacket because it removes your actual volition. Under a full conservatorship, Margaret would lose the right to sign a contract, the right to manage her own bank account, the right to choose her own medical care, the right to vote.
She'd lose everything.
Even the right to decide where she sleeps. David would have absolute dictatorial control over every asset and decision in her life.
And what makes this so incredibly vile is the psychological justification David and Karen use in their petition.
Right. Let's look at their reasoning.
They claim that because Margaret abandoned her home, the home they practically evicted her from, and because she suddenly has unexplained access to large sums of money, she must be the victim of elder exploitation.
This reveals the absolute depth of their arrogance and their ageism.
It really does.
They lack the imagination to conceive that their 70-year-old mother could be resourceful, capable, and financially independent. Their worldview demands that Margaret be weak.
So any evidence of her strength, like fixing the farm, must, in their minds, be the result of a third-party scammer manipulating her.
Exactly. They are utilizing the language of protection and care, claiming she is vulnerable and exploited, to weaponize the legal system.
They're using care as a weapon to execute a second total theft of her life.
But David and Karen are operating on outdated intelligence.
Yes. They think they're fighting the shell-shocked widow who sat silently at the dining room table a few months ago.
They don't realize they are now fighting the woman who ripped a padlock off a barn with a claw hammer.
And commands a multi-million-dollar subterranean empire.
Exactly. Margaret does not panic. She prepares.
She understands that in a court of law, empirical data defeats emotional manipulation.
Yes, she systematically builds her defense. First, she schedules an appointment with her primary care physician and undergoes a full cognitive evaluation.
Getting that certified medical document attesting to her absolute mental acuity.
Right. And next, she hires legal firepower.
She doesn't just hire any lawyer. She retains the seasoned local attorney that her father used to use.
And she provides this attorney with her father's confession letter, the appraiser's certified valuation report of the whiskey, the bill of sale for the first 100 bottles, and every single receipt for the farm repairs.
She builds an impenetrable fortress of documentation.
And the courtroom scene that follows is just a masterclass in dismantling entitlement.
It's so satisfying to read.
It is. Because David and Karen are sitting there with their attorney, presenting their narrative of this fragile, confused old woman who needs her capable son to manage her mysterious new finances.
But the burden of proof in a competency hearing lies with the petitioners. They have to prove she cannot manage her affairs.
And Margaret's lawyer just stands up and annihilates them.
He doesn't yell or posture. He simply opens a banker's box and distributes the empirical reality.
He presents the medical records, proving her cognitive health.
He presents the tax receipts, proving she cleared the property debt.
He presents the invoices, proving she independently managed complex contracting work.
And then the lawyer addresses the core of David's panic, the source of the money.
Yes, the money.
He states calmly, for the record, that Margaret relocated to a property she owns free and clear, and that her recent liquidity is the result of lawfully selling inherited physical assets found on her own land.
And he uses a crucial phrase here. He says, the funds are exclusively hers.
That phrase acts like a physical blow to David. You can almost feel the air leave his lungs in the text.
Yeah.
The judge, presented with this mountain of irrefutable competence and literally zero evidence of impairment from David, is visibly irritated.
As she should be.
She demands to know if David has any actual medical testimony or proof of exploitation beyond his personal concerns.
And when David stammers out a no, the judge bangs her gavel.
She sharply dismisses the petition with prejudice, stating that the court's time has been grossly wasted.
The legal battle is over. But the emotional climax happens immediately afterward in the courthouse hallway.
This is where the underlying themes of the story truly collide.
Yeah, David is humiliated. He realizes vast wealth has just slipped through his fingers, so he confronts Margaret.
He demands to know exactly what assets she found in the barn and what they're worth. He screams at her, "I'm your son!"
And Margaret looks at him, completely unbothered, and delivers an absolutely devastating response.
She says, "Then act like it."
Then act like it. That forward response completely deconstructs the entire concept of biological entitlement.
Because David is attempting to use his DNA, his status as a son, as a master key to her wealth.
And Margaret rejects the premise entirely. She is stating that familial titles are not biological free passes to commit abuse. They are standards of behavior.
Son is a verb.
Exactly, it's a verb. It requires action, respect, and care. Since he failed the behavioral requirement, the title grants him absolutely nothing.
She proceeds to verbally dismantle him. She tells him, "The house, the car, and the bank account were what your father and I built together. You already took those. You transitioned me out of them. The farm is mine."
And then she turns her back and walks away.
Yeah.
She doesn't wait for his reaction. She has defended her borders completely.
And this victory brings us to the final movement of the narrative, where we see how Margaret chooses to wield this newly secured absolute power.
The text executes a time jump here. It is now spring. The winter is over, both literally and metaphorically. Margaret is now 71.
And what she does with the money is so telling.
It really is.
She doesn't build a compound and hoard her wealth, which is exactly what her children did with her husband's estate.
Right.
Instead, she establishes a continuous, quiet liquidation of the whiskey, a few bottles a month to private collectors, and she channels those massive proceeds into the town of Dawson.
She purchases an abandoned storefront on the main street, renovates it, and opens a nonprofit called Hale Community Aid.
We have to look at the symmetry here. She creates an institution specifically designed to help the elderly, the widowed, and the people who fall through the bureaucratic cracks.
People exactly like she was a year ago.
Right.
She takes a hidden, illicit subterranean fortune born out of bootlegging and fear, and she brings it up into the sunlight, transforming it into a legally recognized public healing engine.
She becomes the structural embodiment of the neighbor who put the $300 in her mailbox.
That's a great way to put it.
And of course, Tom Braze is there. The text mentions Tom volunteers at the center on Tuesdays and Thursdays, maintaining the air conditioning and fixing whatever is broken.
The community she invested in is now investing back in her.
But the narrative leaves one complex emotional thread to resolve, and that involves her daughter, Karen.
Right. Karen calls Margaret and asks if she can visit.
She explicitly states she doesn't want anything, she just wants to visit.
And Margaret agrees. Karen drives down alone and sits with her mother on the newly repaired porch of the farmhouse.
And Karen actually apologizes.
The text makes a point to contrast this with the funeral scene.
Yes. At the funeral, Karen dabbed her eyes with a dry tissue, but on the porch, she cries genuine, wet tears.
She tells Margaret she realized she had completely forgotten what it meant to be a daughter.
And Margaret replies with a profound observation. She says, "It happens slowly. Most hurtful things do."
The listener is meant to really analyze the boundaries Margaret establishes in this scene.
Let me push back on this for a second. Should Margaret have let Karen back into her life so easily after the conservatorship attempt? Because that was a massive betrayal.
It's a fair question. It is very easy in fiction to write a saccharine, everything is forgiven Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
But Margaret does not offer blanket amnesty here.
Yeah.
She tells Karen, you can come back, but only when you're ready to come back as my daughter, not as someone looking for what I have.
Which is a very vital distinction.
Margaret is negotiating this relationship from a fortress of absolute financial and emotional security. She doesn't need Karen's money, she doesn't need Karen's approval, and she definitely no longer fears Karen's legal threats.
She's untouchable.
Right. She recognizes that Karen was likely the passive follower in David's aggressive greed. She leaves the door unlocked for reconciliation, but she explicitly dictates the terms of entry.
She breaks the cycle of anger without compromising her own safety.
Exactly. By refusing to let bitterness become her final legacy, she demonstrates the ultimate form of strength.
And the story concludes with a final, really powerful image. Margaret, at 71 years old, walks out to the barn and climbs down into the vault one last time.
She stands among the thousands of bottles of Hale Reserve. She reads her father's letter again.
And in that quiet, climate-controlled space, she realizes that the ruined farm wasn't just a place to hide her father's fortune.
No.
It was the physical manifestation of his apology, just waiting 22 years for her to be strong enough to accept it.
She climbs back up the steel ladder, closes the heavy hatch, spins the combination lock, and walks out into the bright spring sunlight.
The author notes she stands on the property her children once laughed at, looks out over the repaired fences, waves at Tom driving his truck up the road, and realizes she is finally home.
She is surrounded entirely by things she salvaged and built with her own hands. And, as the text beautifully puts it, her own stubbornness.
Her own stubbornness. That is just the perfect phrase to summarize her character arc.
It really is.
Her children viewed her life as an estate to be liquidated and divided. They thought they could sanitize their theft with corporate jargon and legal pads.
But Margaret used a claw hammer, an engraved pocket watch, and sheer unyielding stubbornness to excavate a new life that they couldn't touch. The journey detailed in this transcript is structurally brilliant. It takes the listener through advanced C2 vocabulary words like conservatorship, transition, pneumatic, stoicism, and liquidating, but it embeds them in a narrative that forces us to examine our own societal biases.
It forces us to ask, how often do we assess a person's value based entirely on superficial metrics?
How frequently do we mistake an older person's quiet endurance for cognitive weakness?
It happens every single day. We dismiss people because they don't speak in the aggressive, loud register that society currently equates with competence.
But Margaret proves that the most lethal competence is often completely silent until it needs to strike.
And that is the true utility of deeply analyzing texts like The Inheritance. It reminds us that beneath the peeling paint and the rusted padlocks of the people we overlook, there are often reserves of strength, history, and capability that defy our initial arrogant appraisals.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you, listening right now, to turn that lens inward.
Think about your own life, your own skills, and your own history.
We all have something in our lives that mirrors Margaret's ruined farm. Maybe it's a forgotten talent you used to have, a quirky passion project you shelved, or a seemingly damaged relationship that everyone else, maybe even your own family, has told you is mathematically worthless.
Society is highly incentivized to tell us what is past its prime, what is too damaged to repair, or what lacks immediate market value.
But as we've seen, true value is rarely visible on the surface. It is often buried under decades of accumulated dust, fear, and poured concrete.
True.
So, as you go through your week, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. What if the most valuable, transformative asset you possess right now is the exact thing everyone else has convinced you is a lost cause?
What incredible hidden strength might you find within yourself if you just stop listening to the people telling you to transition quietly and instead pick up a claw hammer, wedge it against the hasp, and break the padlock? It's a question worth finding the answer to.
Thanks for joining us for this depth dive into The Inheritance. Keep looking beneath the surface, and we'll catch you on the next one. Imagine discovering that your quiet, totally unassuming father was secretly a master distiller.
Right, like a complete double life.
Yeah, exactly. And that his death leaves you as the sole owner of this hidden vault. A vault filled with ultra-rare, pristine whiskey that is worth, tens of millions of dollars.
It sounds like a movie.
It really does. But then imagine the very first person trying to rip that fortune away from you is your own son.
That is the real nightmare scenario right there.
It is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Based on case study documents, legal filings, and extensive interviews, our mission today is to answer a surprisingly terrifying question for you. When you suddenly possess immense secret wealth, how do you protect it from internal threats?
The people who know you best.
Right, the people who know your vulnerabilities and who literally already have the keys to your front door.
And that is really the core dilemma of the Margaret Hale case study. I mean, we are looking at a 71-year-old woman who didn't just inherit a fortune, she had to survive a brutal legal siege for it.
A siege from her own family.
Exactly. Her estranged son, David, initiated a conservatorship attempt. And for anyone unfamiliar with how a conservatorship works, it is not just a standard lawsuit.
No, it's way more invasive than that.
Oh, absolutely. It is a legal mechanism designed to completely strip an individual of their autonomy. David tried to have a judge declare his mother legally incompetent.
Just to seize control.
Yes, to get total administrative control over her life, her property, and obviously this newly discovered asset. But the thing is, she fought that battle, and she won.
Which is amazing. And that brings us to the baseline of our deep dive today. Margaret assumes the war is over, right? Because the legal gavel came down in her favor.
She thinks she's safe.
Yeah, she thinks the threat is neutralized. So she starts reconstructing her life on the Hale family farm in Kentucky. And the documents describe this thick, sweltering summer. She establishes this totally new rhythm.
Right. She opens the community aid center.
Yeah. In the nearby town of Dawson, alongside her neighbor, Tom. And this is really vital to understand her psychological state. Margaret goes from the extreme isolation and honestly paranoia of a legal battle.
Which is exhausting.
Totally exhausting. She goes from that into a state of profound connection. She and Tom are running the center, learning the specific, localized anxieties of their neighbors. Like, who is behind on rent, whose truck broke down.
Or internal landscape shifts from defense to cultivation. She's rebuilding.
Exactly.
And we see that mirrored in the restoration of her relationship with her daughter, Karen, too. Karen starts driving down from Ohio every other weekend. And the documentation highlights that they aren't engaging in these massive, emotionally exhausting therapy sessions.
Right. They're not hashing everything out.
No, they're simply sharing space. Karen brings groceries they don't necessarily even need, and they just work in the garden in complete silence.
Which sounds so peaceful. Margaret really thinks she has built this fortress of peace, but a legal victory doesn't actually neutralize a psychological threat, does it?
Not at all. The conflict simply mutates.
Right. So the piece of that Kentucky farm is broken on a very specific July Saturday. And it's not by an anonymous thief, but by a familiar adversary deploying an entirely new strategy.
Here comes David.
Here comes David. A sleek black sedan rolls up the gravel driveway. And you have to contrast this sudden intrusion with the environment, right? Tom is up on a ladder repairing a shutter. Margaret is sitting on the porch, literally shelling peas into a metal bowl.
It's a rhythm of total safety. Just a quiet summer day.
Plink, plink, plink into the bowl, and then David steps out of the driver's seat.
What is critical here is the visual data he presents.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has completely stripped away the armor he wore during the conservatorship battle.
Yeah, no tailored suit.
No briefcase, no aggressive posturing. He is wearing jeans and a polo shirt. And he stands by his car for a long moment, kind of physically gauging the atmosphere before making his approach.
It's so calculated.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
He is shedding the visual markers of a corporate lawyer to present himself as this vulnerable, casual entity.
Right, so he walks to the bottom of the porch steps, and he purposefully shows off, like, the tired lines around his eyes. His voice is remarkably soft, and he delivers this apology.
The Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse apology. He says, I wanted to apologize. What I did, the conservatorship, it was wrong. I was angry and I was ashamed of how we treated you.
And then the kicker.
Yeah. He looks at the ground and adds, I miss you, Mom. I miss being your son. And the only sound after that is the hum of the cicadas.
It is a meticulously calculated deployment of contrition.
See, I want to push back on that just a little bit. I want to challenge the assumption that this is purely calculated.
Oh.
How so? Well, when someone loses a brutal, high-stakes court case, especially against their own mother, the emotional whiplash is severe. Is it possible, that we are looking at a moment of actual uncalculated regret?
You think he actually meant it?
I mean, the human brain can only sustain extreme hostility for so long before it collapses into guilt. Did Margaret see genuine remorse, or was it entirely tactical?
Well, that assumes the presence of empathy, right? Which his previous legal maneuvers actively disproved. I mean, Margaret spent decades in a classroom reading the true intent behind behavior.
Right, she was a teacher.
Exactly. And she studied her son in this moment. She saw the performance of humility, sure, but she also identified the underlying emotion driving it. And it wasn't regret.
What was it?
It was desperation. Regret is a mechanism to repair a relationship for the sake of the bond itself. Desperation is the acute need to achieve a goal at any cost.
Wow.
He realized brute legal force failed, so he pivoted to emotional infiltration.
Which makes this basically a psychological phishing scam.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Because in cybersecurity, a phishing attack doesn't break down your firewall with brute force. It sends you an email that looks exactly like a trusted interface. Like your bank, or in this case, a repentant son.
Right. It relies on your familiarity.
Yeah, and your emotional reflex to click the link and just voluntarily hand over your administrative credentials. David is putting up a familiar interface to harvest access to the farm.
A highly accurate framework. And the target's response to a phishing attempt is everything. Think about it. If Margaret screams at him to leave, she basically confirms his previous legal narrative.
That she's unstable and hostile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if she breaks down crying and embraces him, she lowers her firewall completely and grants him immediate administrative access to her life.
So she does neither.
Right. She does neither. She utilizes masterful emotional regulation. She just looks at him neutrally and asks, "Why are you here, David?"
She refuses to click the link?
Yep. She treats him as an unverified user.
And right at this intensely awkward moment, Karen arrives. An hour ahead of schedule. And Karen functions as this brilliant truth barometer throughout the entire case.
She really does.
She pulls up, sees David's polished car, sees her mother's neutral expression, and her face just becomes a storm of confusion. She understands instantly that David's presence is not a white flag.
It is a new theater of war.
Exactly.
Because Karen lived in the trenches alongside David before she defected to her mother's side.
Yeah.
So she understands the mechanics of his behavior. David does not expend energy on an apology unless he has calculated a high return on investment.
Right. So Margaret, instead of shutting him out, sets her bowl of peas aside, and she says, "The three of us have not been in the same place without lawyers in a long time. Come up on the porch. Let's talk."
Which is a huge move.
It is. By inviting him onto the porch, she transitions the situation from a Cold War of estrangement into an active, embedded insurgency. She literally allows the malware into the network.
It is a massive strategic risk.
Yeah.
I mean, she decides to keep the threat within her line of sight, But the consequence is that David is now inside the perimeter.
Yeah.
And the moment he crosses that threshold, the physical and psychological audit of the property begins.
And we see this audit immediately. David stays for dinner and executes this flawless, perfect son routine. He praises Margaret's cooking. He speaks to Tom with total respect, asking about his carpentry work.
Oh, laying it on thick.
Very thick. He compliments Karen on a real estate sale, and he spends the ensuing weekends driving down, bringing expensive tools, fixing leaky faucets, patching fences.
Playing the handyman.
Yeah. He even tells Margaret she shouldn't be paying Tom for repairs when her own son can do it for free. He is incredibly helpful, but his eyes are constantly cataloging the property.
Notice the structural integrity tests he is running there. By offering to replace Tom, he is attempting to sever Margaret's reliance on an external, loyal ally.
Oh, wow. Isolating her.
Exactly. And by complimenting Karen, he is testing the strength of her alliance with their mother. He is mapping the human terrain of the farm to find the weak points.
And predictably, his audit zeroes in on the barn, which is where the multi-million-dollar whiskey vault is hidden. He starts launching these casual, probing queries.
Dropping little hints.
Yeah, like suggesting turning the barn into guest quarters or a workshop. Then he escalates slightly. He points out the massive new roof and the heavy steel door, and he says, "That door, it looks like a bank vault."
Oh, subtle.
Right. He gives this light, supposedly joking laugh and asks, "What are you keeping in there?" "The family jewels."
He is applying mild conversational pressure to gauge the structural response. He wants to see if Margaret changes the subject rapidly or if her micro-expressions reveal panic.
Or if she gets super defensive.
Exactly. Any of those reactions would confirm the presence of a high-value asset.
But Margaret absorbs the pressure without a single crack. She stoically replies, "Just old tools and bad memories."
That's a great line.
It shuts down the probe instantly. Karen, however, is terrified. She warns her mother that David is clearly hunting for the vault, right? That he's exploiting their hospitality to do it. But Margaret's response to Karen is one of the most profound insights in the entire case study.
It really is.
She says, "A man who is searching for a secret tells you more about himself than the secret ever could."
That philosophy completely shifts the dynamic of power. Margaret recognizes that the act of searching is inherently vulnerable.
Because it shows your hand.
Exactly. It requires the searcher to reveal their priorities, their lack of boundaries, and their specific methodologies. By observing how David searches, Margaret is gathering vital intelligence on exactly who her son has become.
And the depths of his greed.
Yes, she's letting him expose his own playbook.
But while Margaret is quietly gathering this data on David, an external catalyst forces the timeline to accelerate rapidly, like out of nowhere. A prominent bourbon blogger publishes a long-form article.
And this changes everything.
Totally. The article is titled, "The Ghost of Hale Reserve. A legendary Kentucky spirit reappears at auction." It details the recent record-breaking sale of ultra-rare bottles from a mysterious collection.
Does it name her?
It doesn't explicitly name Margaret, but it names the farm and the town of Dawson.
And the insulation of the farm is instantly compromised. I mean, when dealing with high-value, illiquid physical assets like rare art or vintage spirits, obscurity is your primary security measure.
Right, if people don't know it's there, they can't steal it.
Exactly. Once the existence and location of the asset enter the public domain, the threat matrix expands exponentially.
And the real-world mechanics of this exposure are immediate. The farm's phone starts ringing incessantly. Journalists, spirit historians, aggressive collectors.
Everyone wants a piece.
Tourists and opportunists actually start parking at the end of their long gravel driveway, trying to get photographs of the barn. And David, naturally, weaponizes this new reality.
He sees his opening.
He arrives the following weekend, literally slapping a printed copy of the article on the kitchen table. He completely drops the casual persona and adopts this mask of authoritative concern.
The corporate lawyer returns.
Yeah, he tells Margaret, "This is getting out of hand. You're alone out here. This isn't safe. You need someone to manage this, to protect you."
This is a textbook escalation and manipulation. He's using a manufactured sense of urgency to try and bypass her administrative firewalls.
Yeah, creating a panic.
Right. He attempts to reframe his desire for control as a necessary protective measure. It's a classic maneuver of the autocrat, The outside world is chaotic and dangerous. Hand over emergency powers to me so I can keep you safe.
Wow. But Margaret calmly declines the offer. She explains she has a broker handling the auctions, a lawyer handling the trust, and Tom handling the physical property. And the moment she mentions Tom, The mask fracture.
He cannot handle that.
David snaps. He raises his voice and says, Tom is a handyman. This is a multi-million-dollar asset. You need family.
That outburst is incredibly revealing. I mean, David operates on this rigid corporate hierarchy where human value is inextricably linked to financial leverage and social status.
Right, a classist mindset.
Absolutely. He fundamentally cannot process the utility or the value of Tom's quiet loyalty and protective nature. To David, Tom is just working-class labor. He cannot fathom why his mother would trust a handyman over her educated corporate son.
Especially to manage a multi-million-dollar portfolio. So Margaret issues a sharp, immediate rebuke. She looks directly at Karen, who is standing in the kitchen doorway, and tells David, I have family, the part of the family that I can trust.
Oh, that had to sting.
The source documents note that the crack in David's mask sealed over, but his eyes turned completely cold. The insurgency has failed to gain traction through diplomacy.
Which triggers the shift.
Yeah.
From social engineering to physical espionage. Because persuasion and emotional manipulation have yielded zero access, the methodology must escalate.
And this escalation is genuinely chilling. The documents describe the farm late that night. Margaret and Karen are asleep. But out in the woods bordering the property, a small, silent drone equipped with a low-light camera lifts off.
This is wild.
It hums steadily toward the barn, hovering and training its lens specifically on the heavy steel door and the combination lock.
The deployment of airborne surveillance technology fundamentally alters the legal and psychological landscape of the conflict.
I mean, it is a premeditated violation of physical boundaries. So what does this shift to drone technology actually tell us about the mechanics of David's plan? We know the timeline accelerated, but what is the practical goal of filming a padlock at night?
He is gathering tactical reconnaissance for an impending breach.
He's casing the joint.
Exactly. He is casing the joint. The Bourbon article confirmed the asset is vast and real. Margaret's rebuke confirmed he will never acquire it through legal inheritance or persuasion.
So force is all that's left?
Therefore, the only remaining vector of acquisition is force. He's using the drone to ascertain the make and model of the lock, the presence of external security cameras, and the sightlines from the main house.
And he attempts to maintain his cover the next morning. It's a sunny Saturday. David acts unusually cheerful, tells Margaret he's running into town to get some specific hardware for a gate repair, and gives her a hug.
Unbelievable.
He says, I'll be back in a bit, Mom. I'm so glad we're doing this. It is deeply unsettling when you understand the reconnaissance he conducted literally hours prior, but he makes a critical operational error.
Nature gets in the way.
An hour after David leaves, Tom arrives at the back door. He is grim-faced, holding a tangle of shattered black plastic and internal wiring. The drone collided with a low-hanging tree branch near the barn in the dark.
It's a stroke of luck for Margaret.
Tom sets the debris on the table and says, he's not just looking anymore, Margaret. He's preparing.
The shattered drone is the tangible proof of hostile intent. The illusion of the peaceful Saturday is completely obliterated. Margaret is now holding physical evidence that her son is planning an incursion.
So Margaret looks out the window. Karen is reading on the porch. The farm looks idyllic, but it's a facade. Margaret turns to Tom and Karen and simply says, we need to move.
No panic.
No panic at all. She implements a pre-existing countermeasure, and the mechanics of this countermeasure are absolutely brilliant. They back Tom's heavy-duty truck up to the barn doors, but they do not attempt to move the thousands of bottles of ultra-rare whiskey out of the vault.
Which would take forever anyway.
Right. Instead, they move decoys.
And this brings us to the architectural and psychological genius of Henry, Margaret's late father. Because Henry has been deceased for years, yet his foresight is actively dictating the terms of engagement on this battlefield.
Deep inside the concrete vault, Henry had intentionally left a specific contingency plan. There were 24 heavy, completely sealed wooden crates packed tightly with bricks and straw.
Just waiting there.
Yeah. And on the side of each crate, meticulously stenciled in black paint, were the words, Hail Reserve, Fragile.
We really have to analyze the cognitive mechanisms Henry was exploiting here. He didn't just build a physical structure out of concrete and steel to house his life's work.
He understood human nature.
He understood the fundamental laws of human greed. He knew that immense secret wealth exerts a gravitational pull that inevitably attracts malicious actors. So he built psychological tripwires into the physical architecture of the inheritance. He understood the concept of confirmation bias in a high-stress scenario.
Walk us through that. How does confirmation bias work when someone is actively committing a robbery?
Well, when a thief breaches a vault, their central nervous system is flooded with adrenaline. Their cognitive bandwidth narrows drastically.
Tunnel vision.
Exactly. They are operating on a severe time constraint, fueled by anxiety and anticipation. In that heightened state, the brain looks for immediate visual confirmation of what it expects to find.
So they see the crates.
Right. When a thief sees a heavy crate labeled fragile and reserve, their confirmation bias completely overrides their critical thinking.
They aren't going to check it.
No, they will not take the time to pry open a sealed crate to verify the contents. The adrenaline demands they grab the high-value target and extract themselves immediately. Henry weaponized the thief's own assumptions against them.
It is stunning multi-generational planning. So Margaret, Karen, and Tom execute the logistics of the trap. They use a heavy dolly to haul these brick-filled decoy crates up the ladder, out of the subterranean vault, and load them into the bed of Tom's truck.
That had to be exhausting work.
Oh, moving bricks, absolutely. They throw a heavy tarp over the load, tie it down, and Tom drives the truck completely off the property, locking it inside his own private workshop in town. Then he returns to the farm. To me, this reads like the application of Aikido.
How so?
You know, the martial art where you don't meet an attacker with opposing brute force, but rather you redirect their own aggressive momentum to throw them off balance. She is letting David's greed do the heavy lifting.
That is a very precise analogy.
But I have a massive logistical question here. Why go through this elaborate, physically exhausting charade with the bricks and the truck? Tom found the shattered drone. They have the physical evidence of espionage.
You're wondering why they didn't involve the authorities?
Yeah. Why not call the local sheriff, hand over the drone, file for an emergency restraining order, and put a padlock on the front gate?
Because Margaret understands the legal and psychological reality of her adversary. A restraining order is just a piece of paper. If she calls the police over the drone, what actually happens?
Right. David's a lawyer.
It's exactly. David hires a top-tier defense attorney. He claims the drone was a harmless hobby, a toy he was flying to take scenic pictures of his childhood home. The police likely write it up as a minor trespassing issue or a misdemeanor.
So the threat is not neutralized?
It is merely delayed.
And it triggers another war of attrition.
Exactly. David would spin a new legal narrative, tie Margaret up in court over property access, and slowly drain her resources. He would simply retreat, recalibrate, and return later with a more sophisticated plan.
She can't live like that.
Margaret cannot live the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. She requires a definitive, irrefutable resolution. She needs David to cross a threshold so severe, to commit an act so undeniably criminal and deeply personal that it severs his access to her permanently.
She must let the trap spring to catch the wolf.
Perfectly said.
So the trap is set and the bait is removed. David returns to the farm later that afternoon. He's empty-handed, claiming the local hardware store didn't have the specific hinge he needed.
The lies just keep coming.
And the three defenders nod, they play along, and they wait out the daylight. And that night, the atmospheric tension breaks into an actual physical storm.
The environmental conditions perfectly mirror the narrative climax here. It is 2 a.m. A heavy, electrically charged storm is rolling over the Kentucky landscape.
A motion-activated floodlight, which Tom had recently installed on the corner of the barn, suddenly clicks on. The structure is bathed in a harsh, unforgiving white light.
And Margaret is watching.
Margaret is awake, watching from her second-story bedroom window. She sees a figure dressed entirely in black darting from the tree line toward the barn doors. It is David.
The perfect son, ladies and gentlemen.
He is carrying a heavy canvas bag of tools, and the mechanics of his breach are crucial here. He doesn't use the finesse of a safecracker trying to manipulate the combination lock. He deploys the brute force of a crowbar and a heavy-duty drill. The sound of metal grinding and groaning cuts through the sound of the rain.
The use of brute force is the physical manifestation of his psychological state. I mean, he has abandoned all pretense of intellect, legal maneuvering, or charm. He has devolved into pure entitlement, attempting to literally rip his perceived inheritance out of the wall.
Margaret immediately mobilizes her defense. She calls Tom on the phone and utters 2 words, "He's in!" She pulls on a raincoat and boots, grabbing a heavy industrial flashlight.
I love this part.
And the imagery of the family unit here is incredibly powerful. Karen, who previously cowered from her brother's influence, grips a steel tire iron and tells her mother, "I'm coming with you."
That is growth.
Tom arrives moments later, having coasted his truck up the driveway without headlights, holding a long, heavy wrench.
This is the physical realization of the boundary Margaret articulated in the kitchen. This is the chosen family, mobilizing in the dark and the rain to defend their sanctuary against a biological relative who chose to become a predator.
They position themselves outside the barn doors. From inside the structure, they hear a triumphant shout. David has successfully broken the outer lock. They hear the heavy steel hatch of the subterranean vault being thrown back.
He thinks he's won.
But then, a furious, strangled roar of pure, unfiltered frustration echoes out of the vault.
He found the empty shelves.
Exactly. He has found the empty shelves where the decoys used to sit. He instantly assumes he was too late and that Margaret has already liquidated or relocated the fortune.
His worst nightmare.
So Margaret nods to Tom. They pull open the barn doors and enter. David is standing at the bottom of the ladder, inside the concrete vault, violently kicking the empty metal shelving.
Just throwing a tantrum.
Margaret steps to the edge of the hatch, shines the heavy flashlight directly down on him, and her voice booms through the cavernous space. "Looking for this, David?"
The acoustics of a concrete vault would amplify that confrontation immensely. She has trapped him at the bottom of a literal and metaphorical pit, caught in the beam of light in the ultimate act of betrayal.
He spins around, shielding his eyes. The documents describe his face as a contorted mess of greed and fury. And this is the moment his entitlement is completely unmasked. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't try to explain it away.
He demands answers.
He shrieks at her from the bottom of the ladder. "Where is it? Where did you move it? It's mine. Dad would have wanted me to have it to build the business, not for you to give it away to strangers in this hick town."
Wow. We really must dissect the deep cognitive dissonance in that outburst. It reviews the core pathology of generational entitlement. Let's analyze his specific phrasing. Dad would have wanted me to have it.
Right, his dad.
David is referring to his father, Margaret's ex-husband, a wealthy, status-obsessed corporate lawyer. But David is currently standing inside a subterranean vault built by Henry, Margaret's father.
A humble farmer.
A humble farmer and distiller, whom David's father undoubtedly viewed with complete contempt.
He has completely hallucinated the origin of the wealth.
He has mentally colonized the asset. He cannot fathom the staggering wealth. True, multi-generational wealth could originate from the maternal side of his family.
Right, from rural Kentucky.
So his brain has rewritten the history of the whiskey to align with his own lineage, attributing it to his father's business acumen. He actually believes he is the rightful heir to an empire his father had absolutely nothing to do with.
And his sheer contempt for the community of Dawson, calling them strangers in this hick town, proves exactly what the outcome would have been if he had succeeded. He wouldn't have reinvested a single dollar into that town.
Not one.
He would have liquidated Henry's life's work to fuel his own corporate ego and expand a law firm that already had plenty of capital.
His outburst validates every single defensive measure Margaret took. And her response to this tantrum is the definitive strike that ends the war.
Margaret drops her voice. It is devoid of anger, just as cold as the concrete floor. She looks down into the vault and says, "Your father built the business. He left it to you. This was never for you. My father left this for his daughter, the one he trusted."
She draws an impenetrable boundary between the two legacies right there.
Yes.
She acknowledges the financial and behavioral inheritance David received from his father, the law firm, the ruthlessness, the entitlement, and simultaneously she claims her own sovereign inheritance. She claims her father's trust, his patience, and his legacy.
Then Karen steps into the light. Karen stands at the top of the ladder, gripping the tire iron, physically blocking his exit. She looks down at the brother she used to fear and says, "You're a thief, David. You came into our mother's home and you tried to rob her."
Karen forces reality into the room. She strips away David's corporate jargon about building the business and managing assets. She categorizes his behavior with absolute legal and moral clarity. It is a robbery.
It's just a break-in.
The case study notes that in this precise moment, the reality of his situation just crushes David. He realizes he is physically trapped in a hole in the ground, completely stripped of his professional authority.
He's not a powerful lawyer right now?
No, he isn't a powerful lawyer managing an estate. He is just a desperate man drenched in sweat, holding a crowbar.
The tragedy of it is staggering, though. If you think about it, if he had just possessed an ounce of genuine care, if he had just been a real son instead of a corporate raider looking for an acquisition, he likely would have been welcomed into this incredible legacy.
But his obsession with control cost him his family. It is the defining consequence of hubris. The confrontation in the vault cleanly severs the final toxic psychological thread connecting Margaret to her son.
The emotional warfare is officially over.
It is concluded. But practically speaking, this climax leaves Margaret facing a massive logistical crisis. The immediate hostile threat is eradicated, but the secret of the Hale Reserve is now entirely too big to contain.
Right. You cannot have a late-night crowbar-wielding break-in at a secret whiskey vault and then just go back to shelling peas on the porch. The blogger article is circulating, rumors are spreading, and the physical security of the barn has been tested.
The cat is out of the bag.
So we enter the final operational phase of the case study, going public and securing the matriarch's legacy. Let's look at how she handles the immediate aftermath of the break-in. Margaret still refuses to call the police.
Interesting.
She simply looks down the ladder and says, "Go, and don't come back. The driveway to this farm is now closed to you." David climbs out, walks to his car in the rain, drives away, and Margaret never sees him again.
Wow. By banishing him without involving law enforcement, Margaret denies David access to the legal battlefield where he holds the advantage.
Right, his home turf.
Exactly. She doesn't give him a courtroom where he can argue, manipulate, and drag out the conflict. She acts as the sole sovereign of her territory and simply revokes his existence within it.
But the failed breach forces her hand regarding the asset itself. The mystery of the vault is drawing too much heat. But instead of hiring armed security contractors, building higher fences, and turning her home into a militarized compound, she executes a maneuver of radical transparency.
Which is brilliant.
She intentionally reaches out and invites a highly respected, long-form journalist from a major national magazine to the farm. She sits on the porch and gives him total access. She details Henry's history, the betrayal during the conservatorship, the reality of the vault, the thousands of remaining bottles, and the operations of the community center. Why choose maximum exposure over maximum security?
Because Margaret recognizes that secrecy is a depreciating asset that only serves to attract predators. The mystery of the hidden whiskey is the shadow where thieves like her son operate.
So turn on the lights.
By flooding the situation with light, by telling the complete, unvarnished truth on a national scale, she completely neutralizes the mystery. She reclaims the narrative architecture. She isn't the victim of a secret anymore. She is the guardian of a legacy.
She refuses to let a random bourbon blogger or local gossip dictate her story. The resulting national article isn't titled "The Billion-Dollar Bourbon Vault." The journalist titles it "The Matriarch of Dawson County."
I love that title.
The focus permanently shifts from the cash value of the alcohol to the resilience of the woman guarding it.
It is a masterstroke of public relations that intrinsically alters the perceived value of the inheritance. It moves from a financial curiosity to a human interest triumph.
And this public reclamation allows Margaret to scale her philanthropy massively. She formally establishes the Hale Family Foundation. She structures it with a board of directors consisting of the people who actually stood in the rain to defend the farm.
Karen, Tom, and a trusted local attorney.
Yes. Their operational mandate is direct, immediate financial intervention without bureaucratic judgment, which replicates the exact type of grace Henry's neighbors showed Margaret when she first arrived, broken and exhausted.
And the financial mechanics underlying this foundation are a marvel of long-term economic planning.
Oh, the projections are staggering. The foundation's charter dictates that the final bottle of the Hale Reserve will not be auctioned off until the year 2045. How does a barn full of alcohol mathematically translate into a projected 9-figure endowment?
It is a brilliant application of market scarcity and compound interest. I mean, if Margaret liquidated the entire vault immediately, she would flood the market, essentially crashing the value of the individual bottles.
Right, supply and demand.
By staggering the auctions, releasing only a handful of bottles globally each year, she maintains the extreme scarcity and drives the price point higher with each successive release. The massive influx of cash from those annual sales is then diverted into diversified index funds and municipal bonds. The interest generated by those investments alone provides the operating budget for the community center, while the principal continues to compound.
She engineered a self-sustaining $100 million philanthropic engine. She transmuted an illiquid hidden asset into a century-long beacon of community infrastructure, which honestly brings us to the final resonant image of the sources.
The autumn afternoon.
Yes. It is a crisp autumn afternoon, several years after the breach. Margaret is sitting on the porch, watching the leaves turn. Karen is reading a book beside her. Tom is tinkering with the screen door. The rhythm of their life is steady and secure. But there is a crucial detail inside the house.
the pocket watch.
The heavy gold pocket watch that Henry left her, the one with the vault's combination engraved on the back casing. For years, Margaret kept that watch pinned inside her clothing, physically carrying the weight of the secret against her heart every single day.
A physical burden.
Now it just sits out in the open on the living room mantelpiece.
The transition of the pocket watch from a hidden burden to a decorative artifact signifies the completion of her psychological journey. I mean, the numbers on the watch opened the lock opened the vault exposed the secret, and exposing the secret ultimately set her free.
It didn't just free her from the predatory grasp of her son or from her grief. It freed her from the incredibly small, quiet life that society expected a 71-year-old woman to live. She was supposed to just fade away in that farmhouse. Instead, she became a foundational pillar of her community.
Her father labored in secret to build a vault that hid his life's work. Margaret broke that vault open and distributed his life's work to the world. It is the ultimate realization of Henry's legacy.
As we conclude this deep dive, there is a lingering concept I want you to mull over. We have spent an hour dissecting the mechanics of inheritance. Society trains us to view inheritance through a strictly financial lens.
Property deeds, trust funds.
Capital passed down in a sterile legal document, exactly. But Margaret's case study proves that true inheritance is far more complex than that. It is the transfer of behavioral traits, strategic foresight, and resilience. Henry's patience and his profound understanding of human greed lived on in Margaret.
He anticipated a threat, and she utilized his plan flawlessly.
And in turn, Margaret's newfound fierce protective nature was inherited by Karen, who picked up a tire iron to defend her family when it mattered most.
Inheritance is ultimately defined by the actions of the heir, not just the value of the asset.
So take a look at your own operational baseline. Look at the assets you are building, the boundaries you are protecting, and the relationships you are cultivating within your own perimeter. Ask yourself, are you creating a psychological vault that will eventually trap those who come after you in a cycle of secrecy and greed? Or are you leaving behind the keys that will set them free?
A vital audit for anyone to conduct on their own legacy.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the extraordinary mechanics of the Hale Reserve. Until next time.